podcast. And today we have an awesome guest for you. We have John Barrows, who is the CEO of John Barrows Sales, a training organization that has trained tens of thousands of salespeople at top sales organizations like Salesforce, LinkedIn, and Amazon. He's an accomplished writer. He wrote a kid's book with his daughter about how to teach kids how to be a salesperson, which I read this morning, and I'm going to definitely give it to my daughter as well. And he's a top voice on LinkedIn with over 400,000 followers. So definitely has something to say about being an influencer in the broader B2B community as well. So John, thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me on, Dylan. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, let's go. So, whenever I look to thought leaders, and especially in the sales world, a lot of what you take away, I feel like, is lessons that they've had from what maybe they would consider formative sales jobs or things that have happened along their career. So what were some of the things that you did as you kind of climbed the ladder and eventually decided to break out on your own as a solopreneur and really get into this business of helping salespeople become better?
Yeah, a lot of mistakes. Let's put it that way. Got my ass kicked quite a bit. So, look, I started in sales like most other people did, at least back when I graduated. I graduated back in 98, I think it was. And back then you couldn't have, there was no degrees in sales, right? So I got my degree in marketing because I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. And when I got out, I just really didn't like the options. And so DeWalt, thankfully, recruited heavily out of University of Maryland. And they had this new initiative called the Swarm Team. And they positioned it as sales, but it was really event marketing. And so my job was to drive around in a Dodge Ram pickup truck, giving away free tools to construction workers, which was pretty cool.
Cool.
But it did teach me a little bit on sales because, quick examples, where a lot of other sales reps, for instance, would go straight to the foreman and try to sell them on the features and the functions and look at our gears and they're better. Like I knew all that stuff, but then I would go on the construction site and I would start hanging out with the construction guys and I would just see how they were using the tools and I would just ask them questions. I'd let them use mine, give me their feedback. And I learned a lot from them. And then I would go to the foreman. So I started selling more than everybody else with that approach. And then I got promoted to the Home Depot team at DeWalt. And that was a little bit more sales because you had to take, obviously Home Depot had to buy DeWalt tools, but I had to take like a $10,000 order and turn it into a $50,000 order, right? So cross sells, upsells, those type of things. And then I got my real sales education, which was Xerox. So I went and sold Xerox copiers. And not only did I sell Xerox copiers, but I sold them to the government. So, I mean, talk about taking an ass kicking. So that's where I learned solution selling, if you will, and obviously how to take rejection. But it was a great sales education because they had this 8-week sales training program and they were very, very thoughtful. A lot of people don't know, but Xerox actually created solution selling back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Wow.
So I had that as a solid foundation. And then the corporate world just didn't work for me. Like something just didn't feel right. I didn't know why. And looking back on it, I now know why. It's because my parents were both entrepreneurs, even though they didn't call themselves entrepreneurs back then. My dad was a contractor for the FAA, and my mom, when I was born, quit her job, high-paying job, and worked out of the house as a consultant for helping people find jobs. And so when I would come home from school, both my parents were there. Our living room was half my mom's office and half our living room. So I just kind of had that feel. And I always just like doing my own thing too. And so when I was in the corporate world, it just didn't feel right. And a buddy of mine started a business, small business IT services company, and needed somebody to help run sales. And so I ended up leaving Xerox and jumping on board with him. I was the fourth person on board. No idea what I was doing. So I took every training I could. I took Sandler, Miller Hyman, Taz, Spin, you name it. I took it all. And I came across this one group called Basho. And Basho was the first training. It was a group here in Boston that I took that I loved. And it was because it wasn't because, it was because the training was very tactical. It wasn't this big theory about selling or this huge process I had to follow. It was like, hey, here's how to send an email, send an email. Here's how to make a phone call. So I used it, and we ended up being the fastest growing company in Massachusetts for a few years in a row. Got us to about 85 employees and about 12 million in revenue. And then Staples came and bought us. And I spent about a year going through that integration and reminded myself that apparently I'm not a corporate guy. And I because I don't have much of a filter and I really don't like playing politics. So after a little while, Staples offered me another position. They fired me. And I was looking for a job, and Basha was like, John, you want to be a trainer? And I was like, no, absolutely not. I'm like, why not? I'm like, I don't like trainers. And the reason is because up until that point in my career, every sales trainer I had come across was either a failed sales professional or a professional presenter. And if you've ever been through that, where you could just tell the person's never actually done what they're telling you what to do, or if they did it, it was like 20, 30 years ago back in my day, and they were in a suit that's 3 sizes too big and doing a role play that would never actually happen in the real world. Like, I didn't want to be that guy. And they said, don't worry, you have to use these techniques to sell so you can train so you can get paid. So I was like, all right, the like practice what you preach thing, right? So I joined Basho, took on some bigger accounts, brought on some bigger ones, and to make a very long story short, they screwed it up and I took it over. So went off on my own about 15 years ago, and now I'm working with Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, Dropbox, Okta, a lot of these SaaS tech companies, and I'm also selling too. So I always say I'm not a trainer; I'm a sales rep who happens to train, because especially now, there's a lot of quote unquote, and I know we'll get into this, at influencers who are talking all sorts of smack about how great they were back in the heyday of sales, and I'm deeming 2010 to 2022 as the golden age of sales. Like, if you got into sales after 2022 after 2010, in tech or SaaS sales, sorry, just wasn't that hard, right? I mean, we were able to get away with blasting out template emails, making generic cold calls, doing all that crap. And now that sales is hard, is that stuff still working? And I don't think so. So there's all these influencers who, I was on the first person as on the $0 to $1 billion. And it's like, well, good for you. Anybody could have been in that role and been that successful. Is what you're doing successful in today's market? I doubt it. So I'm out there getting my ass handed to us just like everybody else, right? I manage all my own deals. I do all my own prospecting. So when I train, it's not because it's a theory that I like on a slide deck. It's because yesterday I tried this and it didn't work, or yesterday I tried this and it worked, and so I'm trying to just stay ahead of the game just like everybody else.
Yeah, I love it. I love that idea that those that can't teach sometimes, right? Like, that's a lot of trainers it's hard to have respect for trainers when you don't feel like they're out there in the trenches doing the things that you're doing as either a sales leader or as an individual contributor. And something else that I took away from your intro is, Xerox is a badass company, man. You know who else that I interviewed recently who came out of Xerox? Beyonce's dad. Beyonce's dad was a Xerox sales guy, and he's done really well in the music industry.
Love it.
So, the next thing I wanted to hop into is really just to kind of dive into, your sales philosophy and how you approach training. But, I feel like we have to address the Prado principle. I think it's older than sliced bread as it pertains to the sales industry. But, it seems like 20% of the people are still out there generating 80% of the results.
Yep.
Sales is a profession as old as time. And we still haven't seemed to made that much progress on, how do you find great salespeople? Like, what's the secret?
I don't think you find them. Well, no, I'll take that back. I don't think you find great sales professionals. I think you find great people with good work ethic and an ability to adapt. And you turn them into great sales professionals. Everybody's in sales, whether they like to believe it or not, right? Yeah. If you're interviewing for a job, you're in sales. If you're selling your idea internally, you're in sales. So everybody's in sales in some way, shape, or form. It's just who decides to make it a career. And I think it's in good times, a lot of people get into sales because, hey, look at this, it's easy. Like, remember back in 2007 when the mortgage industry, right, was like on fire, right? I mean, people would leave any job, like PhDs would leave jobs and get into sales because, literally like printing money, right? And then all of a sudden, when you actually have to sell and not just give away free crap, oh my God, like, what is this all about? I run away, right? And so I think there's a lot to finding it. And I'll go back to something I remember. I was my first startup, that Thrive Networks. We were 5, I was a fourth person. So we were 4 people, 5 people, 10 people, 20 people. And everybody that we hired was like super fired up and super passionate, right? And then we got to about 50 people. And I vividly remember, like, I went to a conference for Jack Welch one time. Like, Jack Welch came to Boston, and he does this straight Q&A, right? So there's a few thousand people in this stadium. And I asked Jack, I said, Jack, and this was when I was pretty young too. I said, Jack, you talk a lot about passion and drive and all this other stuff. I go, look, we're a 50-person startup right now. And when we were early, like, it felt like everybody was on the same, like, super passionate, super driven. We're up to 50 people, and it's almost like that 51st person that we're hiring just doesn't seem to have it, right? And so, and I asked the dumb question now that I reflect back on it, which is like, hey, how do you instill your passion on somebody else? Like, how do you do that, right? And obviously, it's a dumb question, because he was like, look, you're looking at it all wrong. He's like, you can't instill your passion on somebody else. You have to hire passion. You have to hire drive. And that actually changed my entire outlook on what I hire for, skills. And I don't care about skills. I can teach you skills. I can teach you how to run a sales forecast. I can teach you how to make some cold calls. I can't teach you how to show up. You know what I mean? I can't teach you how to get up early in the morning, get after it, have the, be able to take rejection, those type of things, like those characteristics. So I look for different characteristics, and then I use those to turn, them into sales professionals, because those are the best ones, right? You hear, natural born sales rep. I think there's very few of those in our profession. And I mean the good ones, like not just the sleazy, douchey ones, right? I don't consider them sales. I consider them snake oil, right? Like, screw them. But like the ones who just exude, like the other ones you can tell, like you just want to be around them. They know what questions to ask. They're genuinely curious. They know how to manage their time. Like, I think there's such a small percentage of this population that is that. I know two of them, quite frankly. Jeff Hoffman, my mentor, and my uncle, who is my uncle Tom Quinn, who lives out in San Francisco. By far, like, I'm in the room with those guys, and I'm just like, Jesus, man. Like, I couldn't replicate what they do. The rest of us, though, it's a science, right? People talk about sales as an art or a science. We're going to talk about philosophy here in a minute. A lot of people think, oh, it's just an art. You got to have it or you don't. Wrong. I think it's a science. I think it should be more of a science than an art. The structure, the process that we put in place allows us to figure out our art form along the way. But you got to be a scientist. You got to be able to understand and look at and be analytical and figure out how to improve and be agile enough to try different things to figure out what your style and ultimately will be and how you can perfect your art form.
Yeah, I love that. Are you talking about Jeff Hoffman from Expedia?
No, from Hoffman. I mean, he's got his own company. It's Sell Hoffman.
There's another. I know they get confused from time to time, but Jeff Hoffman from Expedia is a baller too.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So yeah, I think you're right. We're like in my industry, in the media and advertising sales space, we have something called must buy, right? Which is like, people aren't going to stop buying Facebook. Right. People aren't going to stop buying Google. Sales reps at those organizations, they're large scale, really account managers of really important relationships. Yeah. And the lower funnel guys, the long tail guys, are essentially order takers. Yeah. So when you're not on the must buy list, you got to go out and work for your food. And especially, like you said, in a down economy where there's less to go around, that's when the rubber hits the road.
Yes, it does.
I love that. So my next question is, can great sales managers also be great individual producers, or is it one or the other?
So I think it's interesting, because a lot of the problem with sales management is that the best sales reps get promoted to be the managers, and the best sales rep is rarely the best manager. Rarely. And I'm going to go back to my art science conversation, because a lot of times the best sales reps are the artists. They are just the ones who know how to do what they do. And then they get promoted and they get told to, now you have to tell everybody else how to do what you do. And everybody else doesn't have their drive, doesn't have their passion, doesn't have their abilities, those type of things. And they don't know how to replicate it. I actually don't want the best sales rep to be my man. I want the best sales rep to be the best sales rep. Like, what best sales rep in their right mind would want to be a manager? Like, literally, it makes no sense. You're not going to make nearly as much money. You're going to get a ton of shit. You're going to have to deal with HR and reporting and all that crap. and you're going to be sitting behind a desk, taking away from what you love to do. So if you're the best sales rep and you love selling, I would actually run away from management, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
What's that? Yeah. So I want the B plus A minus sales rep. I want the scientist sales rep who has a process. And when I sit in front of them and they miss their quota, they can explain to me exactly why they missed their quota and what they're going to do to hit it next quarter. Right. So there's a structure to it. They can give me insights into what's happening at the various stages. Right. They might not be the most charismatic, the most like, oh, that. I'd rather not. I want that scientist who has a process, because once you have a process, you can replicate that process and you can have other people fit into that process and you can train that way. But if you're an artist, like, good luck. So, as an example, you ever done like a date night where it's like paint night, date night? You ever done those things, right? Where
I've heard of them.
Right. So the interesting thing about those, right? Art and science. I brought my wife to one of these, right? And she freaked out a little bit because she's literally a scientist. Like, she's an environmental scientist, and her artistic talents are terrible. She has a hard time drawing stick figures, right? Now, art was my first major in college, so I'm a little bit more on that side. And so we come into this thing and there's a Monet up on the screen, and my wife's like, you fucking like she almost like had a panic attack. She's like, oh, there's no way this is embarrassing. Why am I here? I'm like, let's just go through it, right? Let's have a few drinks. Let's have some fun.
Trust the process.
Yeah. Well, and what we all sit down, right? And there's an easel in front of us, and there's 4 paintbrushes with 4 different colors: paintbrush 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the artist, scientist, teacher, manager stands up and says, all right, everybody, take paintbrush number 1 and dip it in the blue, and then go and do a circle in the upper right-hand corner. Okay. Now take paintbrush 2 and dip it in the yellow and swath it across the paints like this. Paintbrush 3 and do this, right? And walks you through a step-by-step process to create this painting. And at the end of this process, everybody's stuff kind of looks like a Monet. Now, some might be better than others, you know what I mean? But it looks like that painting. And so if you don't have the ability to walk somebody through that process, you'll never be able to get a Monet.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I think that some sales guys see management and kind of that, that override number of running, because maybe as a sales guy, I can only generate like, say, 10 million, but as a manager, I can generate 100 million. And, that top line number sometimes looks better than what I can contribute individually. So we kind of get sucked into it. But
you're not getting commissioned on that 10 million. If you were getting commission just the same as you were as a sales rep, then shit, yeah, man, I'll go off that all day long. But unless you're going to commission me the same as I'm going to get commissioned on that 100, on that million, no, thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, I'll say my biggest weakness as a manager is that I'm easily tricked in the interview process. I want to believe that everybody is going to be as good as I think they can be, because I'm an eternal optimist, and most of the time, I'm disappointed in my hires, to be quite frank, to be honest.
Hiring is the hardest thing to do, period. Because you get the right people on the bus drives itself almost. You know what I mean? You get the wrong people on the bus, it doesn't matter what your product, service, any of that stuff is. The wheels tend to come off pretty quick.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, in my industry, client appreciation and kind of wining and dining accounts are important. We're not in a regulated sales industry. At the end of the day, we're not curing cancer. So, taking care of clients is a way that we create stickiness and should definitely close deals sometimes. What's the coolest thing that you've ever done for a client that you felt was like really memorable from a client appreciation perspective?
I can't stand bribing clients for their business. That bothers me. Taking them out to dinners, whatever. I think the coolest thing is showcasing them. I think the coolest thing is bringing them up on stage at an event that they, to help them get exposure for their own personal brand or their business. Those are the things I like to do with clients, right? Is show my appreciation by aligning myself from a value standpoint, right? I'm a big values player here, right? So if you and I don't have the same values, I have no interest in working with you, right?
Mm,
So if you do, though, I'm going to promote the shit out of you, and I'm going to do that without you asking in a lot of ways, right? So in some cases, I'll invite you to certain things that I know will put you in a good position to get your brand out there, or I'll invite you to different shows or events or podcasts, bring them on, have a conversation about them, not trying to sell them anything. Right. So I think those are the things that I like doing. I could probably go back and find some cooler things that a lot of other people think are cool. But when it comes to, I think what matters, anybody can go get a steak dinner. Anybody can go to
mm.
friggin' Vegas. Anybody can, you know what I mean? Like that stuff is, yeah, good for you. You know what I mean? But these days, I think time is the most valuable asset any of us have. And so that's why when people offer me the steak dinners and stuff, I'm like, no, I- I'd rather spend that time with my daughter. My daughter's
Mhm.
far more important than you are. And I have plenty of friends to go that I don't ever go out to dinner with. Right. So what value are you bringing to me in that steak dinner outside of the $120, $30, you know what I mean? Like steak, like who gives a shit? Now again, I'm at a stage of my life where it's different. You talk to me at 25 years old, shit, man, go to Vegas and do steak dinners all day long, popping bottles, hit the clubs, like I'm in, right? So I think it depends on who the person is, but it's just like being a manager, right? Like there's no blanket answer to that. It's, you got to find out what's important to people, and you got to drive towards that, right? That's why like everybody's like, oh, this week or this month we're gonna have whoever hits the best target gets the commission, right? The best commission or big
Steak
bonus, right?
night.
It's like maybe I don't give a shit about that bonus. Maybe I want an extra couple of days with my kids, or maybe I want to drive a Ferrari because I've never driven a Ferrari before, or maybe whatever. So that's why the best managers kind of work each individual rep about what do you care about, what drives you personally, and now let's drive towards that. And so that's what I try to do with clients. It's like, okay, what works? What are they trying to accomplish? What do they like to do? And then I try to lean in on that when it comes to a management standpoint or relationship standpoint.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea that you almost provide them things that money can't buy,
Mhm.
right? Like attention from coming onto the podcast and having just more of a value add thought leadership conversation, or potentially putting them in a position to attend an event that's very exclusive that they couldn't even get.
Yep.
You can't buy a ticket to. It's just for people invite only. So yeah, that seems to be a common thread with, like, I talked to the chief revenue officer for Twitch once, and they don't go to any trade shows. They don't go to any conferences, but they do these really cool experiences where maybe they'll get like a chef from like a TV show
Mhm.
on Netflix
Yeah.
to do a dinner. And this dinner is essentially, something money can't buy. Like, unless you have the access, you're not getting in there. And
Exactly.
Amazon has some degree of access that other
Absolutely.
people don't have. So
Yep.
I love it. So my next question, I think I actually answered it by listening to your podcast some more today, but I feel like I need to ask it anyways because I think the audience would get value from it. So, are you a numbers guy or a quality over quantity guy as far
Yeah.
as approach with prospects?
I think with prospecting specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, like just getting your reps in and getting
Okay.
your name out there.
So now I'm always been a quality guy over quantity, right? And especially now, because I think like if we're talking about prospecting, right? Emails, calls, and that type of stuff, I think the volume game is a fool's errand. Okay. Because, well, for a sales rep to do, I think marketing can and should take over that part of the sales process, especially with all the AI stuff and real account-based
Mhm.
marketing and really getting deep insights or whatever. So I think quality, and I also think people now are just yearning for it, right? They're yearning for a real conversation. They're yearning for like, a deeper conversation than just the smile and dial, whatever. Here we got, go, see you later. That said, sales is absolutely still a numbers game. I don't care what anybody says. People say work smart, not hard. Shut up. You have to work hard. You have to work hard. Like this is
Yeah.
like I am definitely. If you look at Challenger sale, right? There's the Challenger sale, the Challenger sale, the Challenger customer, that type of thing. That book, and it talks about the 5 different types of sales reps, like the Challenger and whatever. And there's one that's just a grinder, like the one who just is just hard worker. That's me. Like, yeah, I'm a challenger. I've challenged people before, but I'm brute force. And if I didn't let's go back to grit and drive and passion, I wouldn't be here right now if I didn't have that. There's no question about that. I'll give you an example. Back in early 2023, everything fell apart for me. Straight up fell apart for me. I had 20 employees. I was doing about 6 million in revenue, and then the Q1 of 2023 happens, and all my clients were in SaaS. So the SVB, the bank, right? All that, like all my clients had money at SVB, and
Wow.
so it stopped on a fucking dime. And I was like, holy shit. And I've always sold, right? But I've never but I haven't in a long time been like hardcore selling, like prospecting and that type of stuff. I had to. So I took my CEO hat, threw it away, and put my sales hat back on and went to work. And I ended up getting like 49 meetings in February, 70 meetings in Q1. And it was literally just to stuff as much as I could into the top of that funnel because I had no idea what was going on. And if I wasn't able to do that, if I didn't play if I tried to be like, oh no, it's all quality, I'm only going to focus on these type of customers, there's no chance I'd still be here. So it ebbs and flows based on quality and quantity. I think we're moving into a quality world, but it also depends on what you sell, right? I mean, if you're SMB, mid-market enterprise, right? Obviously quality and quantity down here. But again, I look at SMB as almost marketing should take that over at this point, because it's just unnecessary for a singular sales rep to make cold calls into a business where their average contract value is a couple $1,000 a year. It doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Like the cost of sale is way too much. And so marketing, and with AI and how it's gaining deep insights into all our buying behaviors and start to push actual information in front of us that is relevant, we're coming. That's why the 80-20 rule. I don't believe that sales reps are going to get replaced by AI. I believe that sales reps are going to get replaced by sales reps who learn how to use AI.
Wow.
And unfortunately, that's the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
I think 80% of our population, and I'm not just saying sales, by the way, I'm saying our population, everybody are lazy as shit. They're sheep. They need to be told what to do, and they're just waiting to be slaughtered. And there's 20% that are going to get after it. And those 20% are going to leave those 80% in the dust, period.
Yeah, that's wild. So, I was going to bring up AI later, but let's jump into it. Yep. So you've already ripped the Band-Aid off. For a long time in my industry, the first big innovation that was going to take all our sales jobs was programmatic advertising, right? Because you didn't need sales reps for every website because you had these ad servers that now lived on the websites, and you could just insert your ads, from some computer screen into those websites without having to go and buy every single site. But, my perspective was that there was always going to be a people perspective in the sales game where, talking a little bit before, like a programmatic ad server is not going to take you to a Lakers game or buy you a steak dinner, some of that relationship management piece that we've already touched on. But what are the parts of AI that salespeople should be thinking about? Because, I am looking at it as, okay, well, I don't really trust it yet to write my outreach for me. What should I be paying attention to as a sales guy and a sales leader of how it can help me?
Yeah, I think everybody's running towards the front end of the funnel with this stuff. And I actually think that's ultimately going to be straight AI across the board. I actually think the SDR model right now is a broken model, and it's going to die in a while. Or SDRs aren't going to go away. They're just going to be salaried workers under marketing and operations using all these AI tools. Because you're right, like I'm not there yet, but I've been railing on sales reps for a while who are using these automated cadence tools like, SalesLoft, Outreach, Apollo, those type of tools, because all they're doing is taking marketing messaging, putting it into these cadence tools and pressing play. And I fundamentally never understood the difference between that and marketing. I'm like, actually, marketing can do that better because they're going to use Marketo, Eloqua, Pardot, whatever, and they're actually going to look at the data and they're going to make adjustments, right? So click through open rates, change subject lines, where sales reps are just going to push play, right? So
Yeah.
I never really understood why sales reps did that, but we were able to get away with it because money was free, grow at all costs, go, 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 go. Nobody cared. Now this AI stuff is really doing personalization. Like it's finding personalized stuff. It's writing the emails, right? And so it's better. It's absolutely better than these cadences that these blind cadences that these reps are putting out there, but it's still just not there yet, right? Because I don't know how to describe it, but it's like they just don't have a soul. This is the best way I can describe it. It's like because I get at least 100 of them a day, at least 100, and I get 250 emails a day in general, but at least 100 of them I can tell are AI driven because because it's it's a personal thing and there's hey you're great and da 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 and then it ties to something and I'm like no, but I do believe that if it's going to evolve to the point where every email is going to be relevant, every email is going to be personalized, and I don't care if it comes from a sales rep because if you think about it,
Right.
why do we hate spam, right? Well, we hate spam because it's irrelevant, most of it. It's like I don't give a shit about this, right? But why do I like Instagram? Well, Instagram, I've trained that out. Well, that algorithm's trained me, right? And I mean, I've thumbs up, thumbs down. I've stayed on videos longer, some of the others. So now every single ad that I get hit on Instagram, I kind of want. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, shit, yeah, I want
It's
that.
product discovery.
I didn't even know that was a thing. Holy crap, right? So with all that, with all the information that's out there about you on LinkedIn, on your blogs, on your social, like you can't tell me that AI isn't eventually just going to be like, shoom, 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 shoom. Here's the perfect message for you based on where you are and what you are. So I know that's coming, right? That's why I think it's a fool's errand for sales reps to figure out, like, I think they should use it to create some efficiencies, but still have the give a shit factor. Now, where I think AI is going to have the biggest benefit, two areas. One is coaching. So there's tools now like Gong and Zoom and all these other ones, right? Where you used to like Gong, love them. You record the call, but you still got to listen to that call and give good feedback. So as a manager, it's kind of tough because I'm doubling up. I got to listen to a 30-minute call and then whatever. And I'm sorry, I'll say it. This generation doesn't take feedback very well. They just don't. They take it too personally. They don't. They literally recoil when you're even just giving them basic feedback in a lot of ways. And I know I'm generalizing here, but but now I'm noticing that like managers are afraid to give feedback because of the HR factor, right? So they're afraid to actually give feedback to a rep because they're afraid the rep's going to flip out and say, "Oh, that my manager doesn't like me," and a rep. It's subjective 9 times out of 10, right? So I'm a rep and I'm getting feedback from my manager. And guess what? Maybe that feedback is legitimate, but I don't think my manager likes me. So I'm not going to accept that feedback. Whereas an AI bot, and there's ones that I'm using right now where it actually, you can put in the parameters of, hey, how well did they build rapport? Did they find impact? Did they address next steps? Did pricing come up? So you can put in everything that you want a sales rep to do. It then records the call live and it grades the rep immediately on those things. So right after I get off the call, I get an email in my inbox saying, John, here's your scorecard. You did a great job, 100% on developing rapport. You did a terrible job, a 2 out of 10 or 2 out of 100 when it came to this. And by the way, because of that, here's 2 or 3 pieces of content you should go watch to get better at that part of the sales process. Now it's immediate, it's objective. And I'm now sitting in my house, in my my studio apartment, and I'm actually going to go watch some of those videos to get better, right? So that's where I think it's going to be great for all of us. Then the other piece is just business acumen. I'm using some of this stuff my business acumen has been put on steroids at this point. My prep for meetings is ridiculous because now I go into ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever, and I find some of these tools, right? There's one that I've came across. It's this 10K analyzer. Here's an example, right? 10K is annual reports, right? You can literally, and it's as long as you're paying the $20, you go into this ChatGPT and you say, it asks, what do you do? Right. So I put, sales training, and I give it some of my PDFs and my value propositions. Right. Then it says, okay, who do you want to analyze? And I go find a publicly traded company and I get their 10K and I PDF it and I feed it into the system. Within 10 seconds, it analyzes that entire 10K, pulls out the key summary of it, their main pain points, and then aligns the components of my solution and how it will help support their strategic initiatives, and then gives me messaging that I could use to reach out to those people about that. Like, are you kidding me right now? I can go in and I can search your name. I could be like, all right, tell me everything I need to know about Dylan and what he's doing, right? And it'll tell me. What questions should I ask Dylan based on his role in the industry and where's the trends going? It'll tell me a bunch of questions that I can choose from. So if you look at it as a co-pilot, it is the thing I'm trying to get reps to understand is it's augmentation, not automation. If you look at AI to automate, what's the point? You're automating yourself out of a job. But if you're looking at it to augment and give you some insights that you're going to be the last mile on, and that's the key. I picked that up from Gary Vaynerchuk back in 2017. I was at his office in New York, and I had seen an AI email that was written based off of my personalized email approach that a couple of reps created. It blew me away. I was like, oh my God. And this was well before any of this AI stuff. This is 2000.
Yeah.
And I said to Gary, like that was his 4D session. You go in with like 10 other entrepreneurs and you see all what the best is doing. And then he comes in and does a Q&A. And I said to him, I said, Gary, I just saw a robot write an email better than I ever could. Where does that leave us? And he goes, look, don't try to fight it. You're not going to beat the machines, right? He goes, but be the last mile. He goes, let the AI do all the heavy lifting. Let it do the research. Let it even write the email. But right before you hit send, make sure you humanize it. Yeah. Because as long as, and this is the part we have to pay attention to, I don't think enough people are, as long as there's a human on the other end of that email, call, video, message, we have a chance. Now, when computers start buying things, then we're all screwed. I'm giving up. I'm moving to Costa Rica. I'll see you later. But as long as there's a person buying, there needs to be that human connection there.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think you hit on another area that I think that I wanted to ask about, because I experienced it this last year. And that's kind of leading Gen Z salespeople. I recruited what I thought was probably the best SDR I've ever recruited. Really spent a year and a half grooming her for an AE role. And then she jumped ship to one of my bigger competitors. It's about 10 times larger than me. And like, I think the main feedback that she would have given me was that, you know, I didn't provide enough like mentorship structure, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know, as a sales guy coming up, like I loved having autonomy and not having somebody like up my ass all the time. Like that was like heaven for me. Yep. And I feel like to get that feedback that I wasn't, you know, a good enough mentor or didn't provide enough structure and enough training, I think was pretty humbling. So what do managers that maybe came up in that era where they threw a phone at you and said, sink or swim, what do we need to do better to manage this next generation of Gen Z sellers that are coming up?
Outsource. No, seriously though, you have to expect it at this point. Like you just have to assume that the rep's not going to stay with you. The days of reps staying for years at a company are over, and it's not their fault. I'm not saying because like look at us and we're better. Like my point is these kids just have way more options than you and I ever did. They just have more options. And so if it's not good, or if it's not feeding their specific, whatever their priorities, passions are, they're going to go find somebody else. So you just got to assume, I think you just got to assume that. And so you have to create an engine that allows for cycling through and then hopefully having few stick, right? So one, I think it's just expectations for us as managers. The other thing is, I think, is expectations for them. I personally think life is about expectation setting, right? Because if you think about the last time you were pissed off about anything, I almost guarantee it's because your expectations were misset. Right. Think about it. Right. Like I travel a lot. You know, if I drive into if I go into Boston at 7:30 in the morning and I hit traffic, like I don't like traffic, but I expect traffic. Right. And okay, 7:30 in the morning. If I come home off a red eye at 5 a.m. and I'm driving out of the city of Boston and I hit traffic at 5 a.m., I'm pissed, right? Because I wasn't expecting traffic. So it's kind of one of those things where I think it's about expectation setting and making sure that we understand what their expectations are out of this job. and we give them what our expectations are out of this job, and then making sure that we're still clear on those expectations as we go through. So I think that's step number one. But you said something else that makes a difference, that I think is really important, which is structure. I don't know, how old are you?
42 in October.
All right, so I'm 48, right? So similar, right? We were kind of the last generation to grow up with the figure it out mentality. Like we were like I was a latchkey kid. I would come home, my parents were there. There was a television in front of me. My mom, if I was bored in the house, she was like, "Get the hell out of the house. Just be home by dinner. Don't burn anything down." You know, that type of thing. And I'd go burn shit down. I'd drive around. I'd do whatever. Like I'd get on my bike. I'd go 10 miles away. Who knows where I was, right? So I was able to figure it out. These kids, that's not the way they've grown up, right? And I know this with my daughter, right? So, you know, every kid now, their life is structured. So they go from school to this hour to this hour. Then they have soccer practice from this hour to this hour. Then they have to come home. They have their iPad for 30 minutes. Then they have 2 hours of homework. And then they can talk to their friend for 30 minutes. And then, right? So literally every moment of their life is structured. And they're taught to the test. So MCAS and that type of stuff, especially here in the States. There's no more critical thinking. It's no, you got to pass that test so that we can get our good grade here for the school. So you take a kid who's been put in structure their entire life, taught to the test, and then you get them out into the real world. And you have somebody like you or me look at them and say, figure it out. They look at you sideways. Like, what are you talking about? Figure it out. Tell me what to do. And the problem is that somebody like you or me, like, look, I don't know about you. I don't like being in structure. Like, I don't like it. I'm like, I'm always, if you put structure on me, I'm like, there's got to be a better way. Right. But I love building structure. Right. But you tell a kid, like, so the structure is the answer. But a lot of times they say, oh, well, tell me what to do. Unfortunately, a lot of people, when they say, tell me what to do, I don't know what to do. Okay, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. Here's a script. Here's a template. And you take a kid who's been taught to the test, given structure their entire life. You give them a template. You give them a script. They're going to read the script. They're going to push play on the template.
Wow.
If you give them structure to play within, we like building structure. We don't like being in structure. They need structure or else they fall apart. And obviously I'm being very general here, but I've seen enough to know this is true. And so our job is to create a structure that they can play within and then let them play, because they will execute within that structure better than you and I ever would. So it's our job to give them that structure, set the right expectations, give them structure, and then hold them accountable and see where it goes. And then again, have the expectation that most of them are probably going to bail because they can't take it. They're going to go find something else. But we also need to maybe mentor them a little bit on all those experiences we've had when we've chased what we thought was a better thing, to realize that it wasn't, and grass isn't always greener. So I think there's a lot of that, just like, hey, let me have this conversation. You know what I mean? Like, let me tell you about the time I went from this company to that company and got kicked right in the teeth. And then it was really hard for me to actually go get another job because people saw I was jumping positions. You know, maybe they'll listen, maybe they won't, but you got to give it, it's a different approach these days. Cause I'm there with you. Like, I was like, give me a territory and get the fuck out of my way. Like, please leave me alone. Like, this company woo shit, like going out to team dinner, like, get away from me. I just want to make money and stop asking me about what I care about. Cause that's what I want. I care about you leaving me alone and getting out of my way. That's what I wanted. That's not the mentality these days.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I guess it's about, taking that sink or swim mentality that maybe you and I grew up with, where it's just like, here's the tool. You got a phone and a computer. I'll see you later.
Go.
But do that, but also show them the steps. I don't know. I'm a big believer in learning by doing, but I think there can probably be a little bit more of a process.
They have to, because they're too scared right now, quite frankly. Like, that's why you have to do the role play stuff, and you have to, like all those things to prepare them for the scariness of actually having a conversation with somebody. Because again, you got to think about the mentality. They don't have that. They've grown up. A lot of them have grown up like this. They don't understand body language. They don't understand how to have a genuine conversation with somebody. They don't have business acumen. So they can't just talk. They got to read their script. They got to make sure that they check off the boxes with their questions. They got to make sure they go through their demo like they got badged for in boot camp, because when they got at the end of the boot camp, they got that fucking gold star that made them feel really good. So they're looking for that gold star. And again, it's not their fault. We've done it to them. People bitch and moan about the trophy generation, right? Every kid wants a trophy. Well, who gave them the trophies?
Yeah,
we did.
Right.
Like, I don't know, but like when you were a kid, like for me, if I came in 5th, 6th, 7th, and I was upset, but my parents were like, okay, well, if you don't want to be upset, then get better. Like, they didn't take me out to ice cream. They didn't say I was a good boy. They didn't give me a participation trophy. I felt like shit and they knew it. And they said, okay, well, if you don't want to feel like shit anymore, get better. Now the kid feels the same way that we did, as far as they feel like shit, they feel bad, but the parent says, oh, that's okay. It's okay. We don't keep score here. Like, what the fuck? You don't keep score? Like, how do you possibly judge whether you're good or not if you don't keep score, right? But that's just the world that it is. And so we have to understand that we have created this. And so it's our responsibility to figure out how to manage it.
Yeah, no, that's great. So you said something else really interesting. You get 250 emails a day. 100 of those come from AI. What made you decide to do this podcast? What made you decide to say yes to my email, even though we don't know each other?
Look, I think goes back to, the brand thing with clients, right? And getting people get their voice out there, right? I'm trying to do my best to connect with people who give a shit, right? And I don't care that, like, quite frankly, I start a lot of my trainings off like this. There was one time I did a training in front of a group, and it was about 300-400 people. And at the end, the rep goes, "Hey, John, all those logos that you put up there, right? Like, those are all of our competitors, basically. So if you're going to train us all in the same stuff, like, how are we going to differentiate?" And my answer to him was 10, 60, 30. And he goes, "What?" I go, 10, 60, 30. I go, 10% of you in this room are going to take what I tell you and execute it at the highest level, because that's the type of people you are. 60% of you in this room are going to do something different because it's easy and it makes sense. And 30% of you in this room ain't going to do shit different. So the question isn't how many people can I train? The question is what percentage do you want to be in? And I say that I live between the world of the give a shit factor and unconscious competence. I cannot get you to give a shit. I can't. And quite frankly, if you don't give a shit, I don't either. Like, anybody who comes to me looking for the silver bullet or the perfect email, I tell them, leave me alone. I don't want your money. I don't want to even talk to you. If you are looking for the easy way out, go away, because there is none, right? But if you care, man, I'll give you everything I got. I will give you every tip, technique, failure, example, story that I have, so that you can elevate to the point where you eventually don't need that and you can just be unconsciously competent and be you. So when I talk about podcasts, like, that's why I come on a podcast like yours, because I'm hunting for those people who give a shit. And I'm trying to get a message out there to maybe those people who do give a shit, but don't know what to do and don't know how to get out of where they are right now, and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe something that he just said sparked something in me to say, yeah, I got to get after it right now. You know what I mean? I've been kind of going through the motions because I'm pretty good at my job. You know what I mean? Like, I'm probably the best rep here, even though I'm average, and I know it because I'm kind of half-assing everything. Like, that rep who's just like kind of sitting there in neutral, but doesn't know why, but wants more, needs a little bit of a wake up. Come on a podcast like this, and hopefully they can listen to it and say, shit, man, I got to get off my ass.
I love that. Well, I'm glad to be able to give you the platform, because we're definitely speaking the same language. So, all right. So you wrote a sales book with your daughter. I read it this morning. It was a really quick read. And, I think I'm grooming one of my daughters to become, a sales savage as well. She's already done 2 influencer deals for me, and she's only 10 years old. She's done her own dog walking business around the neighborhood and is always doing entrepreneurial stuff, kind of shows some of those, some of those early stage, X factor, I guess, if you will. But what I really loved about your book is it kind of walked through a couple of key things that I think are smart for kids to learn about sales or business in general, which is, one, you got to go where your customers are. The fact that she decided to go and door knock. I like the part about, she identified a customer that had a nut allergy. So when she customized her product to that customer, the customer couldn't get enough of it and bought tons of the inventory. So really appreciating, that when you go the extra mile for your customer, they'll buy, and they'll buy big from you. But were there any other key lessons that you wanted to come through with the book?
I think that, you know, I mean, look, for me, it was fun, because that was around the time, like when my daughter was born, she's 13 now. And when she was born, I was a weekend dad, basically, right? Um,
Mm,
I was traveling. I mean, I got 2 million miles in less than 10 years. I'm on a fourth passport. And so, it was hard. And also when your kids are, young and you tell them you're in sales, they don't really understand what that is. Right. So, kids look at lawyers, doctors, all that stuff. They see that on TV, so they know what that is. But when you tell your kid you're in sales, they kind of look at you like, what do you talk, what do you do? Talk to people all day long? Well, and so it was a really good opportunity for me to kind of help educate her and work, and also just do something fun, that talked about like what this profession is really all about. And I tell people all the time, if sales isn't about convincing anybody of anything. Like if you think sales is about convincing people, I think you're doing it wrong. Sales is about people helping people solve problems or achieve goals. That's ultimately what it is. And it's all around us, right? It's
mhm,
got such a negative perception, but if you think about it, literally everything that you are experiencing or doing is because of sales.
mhm,
Somebody had to sell somebody the material here to make this cup, to then sell it to the store so that I could then buy it so that I could have a drink right now. Right. Like somebody had to sell somebody on this Restream studio so that we could have this conversation right now. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm trying to break the stigma of sales, and I'm also trying to introduce it to kids at an early age to see it as an actual profession that they could be proud of, instead of the default profession of what it is. Right? It's
mm.
most reps. And my second book, which I was going to write until AI came out, but um, was This Is Sales, and it's for the high school kid before you go to college. I personally think college, 4-year college, is a joke right now. Absolute
Yeah,
joke. When you and I were growing up, it was necessary to go, so we had our degree so that somebody could actually interview us. Now, to go to a 4-year school and go $300,000 in debt to get a $50,000 a year job that you probably don't even want is a joke as far as I'm concerned.
yeah.
And so I actually, like, we're going to private school for high school for my daughter. I'll be shocked if she goes to college. Like I'm not going to push her to go to college. I'd rather have her take a year off and travel the world, or I'd rather write her a check for $200,000 and help her start 5 businesses and have them fail all of them. So
Wow.
because in 4 years she'll walk out with far better knowledge of what the world's really all about than some dumbass degree that's good. Now, and again, don't get me wrong. If you've picked a lane as a kid, like if you're like, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, whatever that is. If you are one of those special 20% of people who in high school or whatever it is, they just know exactly what they want to do, then God bless you, go to college, right? Because
Mhm.
you need that for whatever that degree is. But for the other 80% of us that are just trying to figure it out at 18 years old, trying to tell a kid you have to define what you want to do for the rest of your life at 18 is insulting to me. So what I want to do is I want to introduce sales to kids so that when they come out of a high school, hey, maybe instead of going to college, maybe I go out and make a few bucks. Maybe I
Mhm.
learn sales a little bit and I've experienced what the world is all about, make a few dollars, and then come back and look at college in a different way of what I want to learn. That's why I think MBAs are actually where you learn, because that's mostly, unless you go straight from college to MBA, then you're an ass. You're just scared to go out in the world. Um, but if you go to college and then you go out into the real world and then you come back and get your MBA, you're choosing your education there. You're saying, I want to learn this because I just realized what I don't know. Right. So that's where you learn stuff. College is a social education, and I think it's an important one too, like out of your mom, out of your parents' nest and all that stuff. But sales to me is it's the most flexible profession there is on the planet. Right. So think about it. If you go to school to be a coder, like you're a coder, right? Like think about it. Remember like 3-4 years ago, it's like, oh, coding, be in coding. Well, if you spent 4 years to learn how to be a coder and then ChatGPT just launches last year, like,
Yeah.
shit. Now I got to go retool myself. I got to go learn something completely new because AI just completely disrupted my industry. If you're in sales, AI comes in and disrupts an industry. It's like, all right, well, let me go over here. You know what I mean? So it's flexible. It's the most For me, from an equality standpoint, as far as women, people of color, that type of stuff, it's the most even of all of it, because the harder you work, typically the more you get paid, so you can kind of
Yep.
dictate your own path. So it's the most financially rewarding profession. Best sales reps get paid far more than doctors and lawyers and everybody else. And so that's what I want that book to do, is I want to hopefully spark an interest in a kid to say, maybe sales is something I could see myself doing and grow into, and then change the perception. Because the reason, and I'll shut up after this, the reason that sales is, I think, a reason that sales has such a bad reputation is because we get out into the world. You take a normal kid, okay, who's pretty good ethics, pretty good, nice person, and you put them into sales right out of school because they didn't like their major, whatever it is. And you give them limited training, but you give them a territory and a quota. And you say, if you don't hit your quota, you're going to be fired. And so therefore, you're not going to be able to eat. You're not going to be able to pay your rent. You take a relatively normal kid with good ethics and good values, you put them in that scenario, they'll start to walk that gray line. They'll start to do things that are unnatural, right? Just so they can get paid. And so because there's no education in it, and we dump them into this and give them a little bit of product knowledge and say, here's how to make a cold call, good luck, it's this negative perception that just drains us down. Whereas if you educate a kid early of what sales is truly all about, by the time they get into the profession, they can level us all up.
Yeah, I love that, man. I think we have a similar philosophy around college. I hope my girls, go do something that they're passionate about. College note, I noticed you were in the Greek system when you were in school. Were you able to leverage? I was a Sigma Chi. I've leveraged that very heavily in my career. I met Keith Kroc, who started Ariba and DocuSign because he was a Sigma Chi. Were you able? I think that was probably the only thing that I actually used from college was how to run a small business, which was the fraternity and the association that came with that. So, do you have any stories from your Greek experience that kind of helped you out along the way?
Probably none that I could share, quite frankly. No, I was. So I grew up in Bedford, Massachusetts, and we had only about 12,000 people in our school, in our town. And so I went to University of Maryland, and they had 35,000 students at University of Maryland, and I loved it because I didn't know a single person there. But very quickly, I was like, I got to figure out a way to kind of shrink this college down a little bit. And I was never, up here in the Northeast, right? Fraternities aren't really a thing. They are, but they're not a big thing. Whereas the further you go south, obviously they get big. And so I never really thought of fraternity. I had the perception of fraternities, right? And so I remember going in and all right, let me go with this pledge. Let me see what's pledging all about, the rush, right? That type of thing. And I went on fraternity row, and it was exactly how I thought. Everybody's wearing their polos and their khakis, and I'm like, this is gross. Everybody looked exactly the same. And then I go off campus a little bit, and there's this dilapidated piece of shit house, Theta Chi, and I'm like, I didn't even know it was there was nothing going on outside, nothing, but they had Greek letters. I was like, I didn't even know it was a fraternity. So I walked right in, and there's a bunch of dudes just sitting on a couch watching a game. And there's a black kid, a white kid, an Asian kid, an Indian kid, and they're all just drinking beers and having fun. And I was like, are you guys like rushing? Are you guys a fraternity? And they're like, yeah. Want to come in and have a beer? I was like, yes, I do. I was like, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. And we were the Animal House on campus. Like when you see the movie Animal House, that's literally what our house looked like. We threw the biggest parties and the biggest benders and all that other stuff. I was pledged, president and those type of things. So I did learn a little bit of structure on it. And I learned how to take a beating because we were the worst hazing college. We were the worst hazing when we actually got caught hazing. And that's one of the things I learned was we got hazed. We had Hell Week. And when I tell you Hell Week was Hell Week, those are some of the stories that I wouldn't wish on anybody. But then the second semester, like when I got inducted, like as a brother, I was the assistant pledge marshal, and I was like all ready to kind of kick some ass come Hell Week time. And we got caught halfway through, and every single one of us got kicked out. Like we all got kicked out of the fraternity. We all had to interview to come back in. And that's where I was like, oh boy, okay, this isn't cool. And, and I also learned that there's a level of camaraderie that is appropriate, and there's a level that's not.
Sure.
The thing I liked about our fraternity when it came to hazing was there was a line. There was a line. And if the brothers crossed that line, the pledges could push back. Right. I remember like we were all sitting there like this one time in a circle, and I'm like blindfolded and holding hands like this, and they're yelling in our faces. And right. And one of the brothers punches me right in the gut, like literally punched me right. Like, you know, when you're not expecting a punch in the gut and you get punched in the gut like that, like everything. And they took the blindfold off of me, and they said, 2 men enter, 1 man leave. And it was me and that brother in the middle of that circle. And I could do whatever I wanted to that brother to get back at him. And I ended up beating the ever living shit out of him, and then coming back into the line and put my blindfold on and go. So I think I learned a little bit about respect to a point. You know, I learned what not to do and how not to treat people in a lot of ways, because I saw how some people were treated and some people weren't. And I also learned the organizational structure of how to run meetings, how to be, you know, reasonably responsible as a human being after a little while, at least.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, we were similar. We were definitely a very social house, very diverse as well. In Sigma Chi, we like to say different temperaments, talents, and convictions, but we were not a stereotypical house. We had a lot of different people, and we, you know, if people came through Rush, like a guy from Boston, for instance, because it's a California school, we'd be like, oh, we want that out of state guy because he would add something different. And the power of the alumni association.
Yeah, we didn't
really
have that.
Striking.
We didn't have that. We like I never like I hate to say it, but I'm not friends with. I don't keep in touch with any of my fraternity brothers. I don't. You know what I mean? I did for some reason. It's just we all just went our separate ways, and I think it was just. I think it would. If I really think about it, for me, I'm very what's next state like type of person, and like glory days is one of the most depressing conversations I'll ever have with. So, oh, remember back when we were in high school? Remember back, like literally, like I run away from those conversations, because if that was like the best time of your life, to me, that's really sad. To me, tomorrow is the best day of my life. And so I think for me, I compartmentalized it. I'm like, okay, cool. College, did that, done. See you later. Next. Now I'm off to my professional career. And I didn't really look back much. And so we also were not like that type of a fraternity that we're like super into alumni and those type of things. We were just a bunch of drunks and had a good time. So and the Sigma Chi's, you guys were the meatheads on our campus. Like you guys were like the fucking like the athletes and all that other stuff. And we ended up whooping your guys' ass more than a few times because we were just a bunch of degenerates, but we also were pretty athletic. So we always fought each other quite a bit. But it was a fun experience. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I like it. All right. Well, hey, let's get into the part of the conversation talking about you as a LinkedIn influencer, and is really my primary line of business. You know, we help companies like Zendesk and Barrows with their B2B influencer marketing strategies on LinkedIn. So tell me a little bit more about the experience of becoming a LinkedIn top voice, and what has that done for you professionally, and really just how does that help you on the platform?
Yeah, I think I was fortunate, right? So my first startup, you know, Thrive, somebody sent me an invite to be on LinkedIn. I didn't even know what it was back then, right? And I got my number here, as a matter of fact. I was number 36,541. So literally one of the first people on LinkedIn, because the first 20 accounts, first 20,000 accounts apparently were all dummy accounts to show that they actually had people on the platform. So I'm probably one of the first 20,000 people on LinkedIn. And so, you know, and I didn't even know what it was. So I used it. But again, I'm going to go back to context here. I did so much networking early in my career. I went to every networking event I could go to. I was part of 3 or 4 networking groups that I would meet with on a weekly basis. So I knew what it was like to network, right? So when LinkedIn came out, it was really natural for me. I was like, oh, cool. Well, this is all right. Let me use this just digitally as opposed to this way. So I started really leveraging it early days. Then I started to kind of get into the like, okay, I want to build my and I didn't really think about building my brand, but when LinkedIn opened up the follow me, you know, because there was only connections at first, and then there was you could follow people. When they turned that on, I think I was just right place, right time, and it just exploded, right? So all of a sudden I started getting a bunch of people following me because I just kept being consistent with the content that I was putting out there. And I wasn't using, I think a lot of people, sales reps specifically, look at LinkedIn the wrong way, in my opinion. They look at it as a direct selling tool. And I couldn't disagree more. Like, I tell
Wow.
people that like the worst thing you can do on LinkedIn is pitch slap somebody, right? Is where you connect with somebody and they say, yeah, they accept your connection. And then immediately after you send them an email saying, hey, thanks for my connection. And here's all the great shit that we do. You want to sell, you want to buy it? Like that's the fastest way to get disconnected from me, at least. And so I think a lot of sales reps look at it as a sales tool, like just like they would an email, right? Like, or a cold call. I actually think of LinkedIn as a networking platform, as a brand platform, as an engagement platform, as a relationship platform, right? And if you look at it, I think sales reps these days need to be mini marketers. We need to be, because it's not about the cold call, the email, all these. It's about everything. It's about all these impressions that you leave, right? Because I think there's a stat that I read that only like 3 to 5% of any of our addressable markets are actually in market for what we have, right? So whatever you're selling, your entire addressable market, there's only 3 to 5% that are actively looking for what you have. So the other 95 to 7% are at some stage of never going to buy your shit, to kind of a need, but already have someone in place, to a need that they're looking around for, to, you know what I mean? So we have to be out there making impressions. And that's what LinkedIn's all about to me, right? I want to add as much value as I can to the platform. I'm not doing a bait and switch to like, oh, look at this, and then have you go buy my program, right? I'm flooding it with as much value as I can. And I'm connecting with people, and I'm cross-checking, tagging people in other posts and those type of things, commenting on people's posts, going back to helping boost their profiles, right? Especially now that I have, the audience that I do, I can lean in on somebody else's post and help boost up, my audience comes to theirs. And so that's, to me, it's been able to, for me, a lot, obviously exposure, top voice. I wasn't going for top voice, but I think just through the consistency and the value of the content that I was putting out there, they recognized it, obviously. I think I've been top voice for like 3 years in a row or something like that.
Wow.
And I'm up to about 400,000 followers, which, I wish I could go in and clean those up, quite frankly. Because there was a point where I just didn't care anymore. I stopped like looking at every single person that connected with me. And I was like, yep, I'm just going to accept everybody. I wish I could go back in and clean that. I wish LinkedIn had a strength of connection a thing where you could see if nobody's ever engaged with your content, if nobody's ever, you know what I mean? Like, go away. Like right now, I think what hurts me from an influencer standpoint is the engagement, right? So I'll do a post and I'll get 300, 200 comments or something like that, which sounds like a lot. But when you compare it against 400,000, it's not. Whereas the person that gets 100,000 has 100,000 followers and gets 100, 200 comments, like the ratio is a lot better, right? So I wish I could clean it up, but I'm still just, trying to do my thing, just get out there, add as much value, share as much insights as I can, and try to, cut through some of the bullshit that's on it too. The platform, quite frankly, there's a lot of influencers who are putting stuff out there that you could just, first of all, they've only been in sales for like 2 or 3 years. It's like, really? Like, you've never done anything. How can you tell me what, you know what I mean? Like, stop. Or again, you were successful in the heyday of sales because you were at, Zoom. Like, think about being a sales rep at Zoom and after COVID. Like, it's like a mortgage, it's like a mortgage person, right? It's like, come on. So there's a lot of people spouting a lot of shit out there, and I'm trying to kind of cut through that noise with some reality and telling people that it's not all roses over here. Like, you got to put in the work, and trying to break through that perception that, a lot of people have about sales or about success or any of that stuff. So it's been a good platform for me, and there's no question about it. And, we'll see where it goes from here.
That's awesome. So, we're getting down to an hour here, and I don't want to take too much more of your time. So I think we'll head to the final lap. So what are you most excited about the future of the work that you're doing with your training company, and just what's coming up over the next 6 months to a year?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be excited for. There's a lot to be worried about, no question about it. I think there's agility is probably the number one competitive advantage anybody has, to be able to, adjust with what's going on right now. Because I mean, it's pretty evident to me, what worked 2 or 3 months ago is just not working anymore right now. So I think I'm always excited about figuring stuff out. Like I just like figuring things out. You know what I mean? Like I'm definitely a move forward type of guy. I don't care what's behind me type of thing. Probably could learn a lot if I look behind me a little bit more often than I did. But yeah, I mean, the AI stuff, I'm really I'm scared of, but I'm also very intrigued by and fascinated by. So I'm interested. I'm working on creating an AI version of me as a coach and all that fun stuff. So I'm curious where that's going to go. I'm really curious on how marketing is going to, use AI to be far more personalized and really that sales rep of the future. I'm watching kind of evolve, and my vision for that is Iron Man, right? Because if you think of like Tony Stark as the human, right? He's got everything as a human, but if he fights the aliens, he'll get killed, right? So he has to create the suit. But remember that first suit was kind of like this clunky thing and and it blew up, whatever. So it really didn't become Iron Man until he put Jarvis to it.
Yeah.
Right. And then you got Jarvis, the suit plus Iron Man. Now you got Iron Man. Right. And so I'm looking forward to that and how we can continuously add more value and shift it. And this break that's happening right now, I think last year was the transition year. I think we are in a legacy model. We are all working in a legacy model right now. But I'll bring it to sales. The new sales, I don't think nobody knows what it's going to be, which I think is kind of cool. So I'm curious. I'm interested to see this evolution of sales and how we evolve with the tech, and how we figure out a way where the human interaction makes the most difference. And find my little slice along the way.
I love it, man. Well, hey, this interview has been chocked with great insights. So thanks so much, John. Anything you want to plug before we sign off here?
Yeah, I mean, look, I got a podcast, I got the Make It Happen Monday podcast where I'm out there having these type of conversations, right? Just again, learning out loud. My membership, I got individual members that can come on board. And what I do is I got 2 programs, Filling the Funnel, Driving to Close, which are the foundational pieces of the sales process. And I deliver those live every single month. Then it's the same training I give to Salesforce and all those other companies. So anybody can join. And I do workshops throughout the month trying to learn about what's happening in the AI and the sales skills stuff. I mean, between big companies and also, I'm looking for a lot of sponsor stuff too now, because I'm back on my own. I told you earlier, I was 20 employees, 5 whatever million. Now I'm back being me. And so now I've kind of, I don't want to say been muted, but over the years, I started as John Barrows, right? Jay Barrows. Then we went to JB Sales. Then we went to Sell Better by JB Sales. And then it was Sell Better. And the whole idea was to push kind of the brand out there and suppress mine, because I wanted to build the company. But it's pretty evident right now that brand matters. Personal brand matters. People don't trust companies, they trust people. And so I feel like now I've worked for 15, 20 years to build my brand in a very, what I think is authentic, real way, and tried not to cut any corners. And now I want to leverage that for other brands that give a shit, that have the same values, right? I don't want to be a NASCAR logo here. I have no interest in taking money from companies that I don't believe in. But I think there's some really fun things that I can do with the right brands, so that we can both benefit from this. So I'm looking for those type of things.
I love it. Well, that's my bread and butter. So I'll be keeping you in mind when I'm out there talking to brands about what LinkedIn influencers they should be sponsoring.
Appreciate it, man.
So yeah, man, I learned a lot. I'm excited to follow along and continue the journey with you. So I'll definitely be tuning in. For everybody at home, if you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to follow us or subscribe wherever you happen to be watching or listening. If you would be so kind to give us a review, that actually helps the show find additional people. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, if you know a sales savage out there somewhere who would benefit from the conversation that John and I had today, don't forget to share this episode with them so they can follow both me and John as we go out there and try and make the best sales cultures in the organizations that we're having an impact on. So without that being said, John, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Dylan. I really appreciate it.